Hi, my name is Cherstin Lyon. I'm the director of the Honors College at Southern Oregon University. I'm also the author of Prisons and Patriots, Japanese-American Wartime Citizenship, Civil Disobedience, and Historical Memory, published by Temple University Press. Thanks for joining me today. This presentation is titled More Than a Question of Loyalty, a Question of Citizenship. Life was going its calm and orderly, if somewhat unnatural, way in Topaz, Utah on the afternoon of January 28, 1943, according to War Relocation Authority community analyst Russell A. Bankson, when the teletype stuffed away in the corner of the telephone exchange room in Administration Building A began to clatter out a message. A few moments later, Bankson wrote, the operator laid a message before Mr. Hughes, who studied its wording carefully. Then, suddenly he began to act. Telephone bells jangled in the offices of division chiefs. It was as though an electric current on the loose was flashing through Topaz. The teletype that set off a flurry of activity in Topaz on January 28, 1943, came from Secretary of War Henry Stimson. The War Department had created a combat unit exclusively for the Issei. Volunteers would be recruited from the 10 camps through a loyalty registration process. Shortly after Stimson's announcement, the War Relocation Authority announced that it would conduct its own loyalty registration program for all detainees ages 17 and older. The combined effort was designed to clear the detainees for relocation and recruit Issei volunteers for the military. The War Department and War Relocation Authority called this loyalty registration. Japanese Americans, on the other hand, understood this as an assault on their citizenship rights, or what few rights they had left. Discussions of the loyalty registration program tend to focus on the questionnaire itself, especially on the last two questions, questions 27 and 28. These questions were perplexing and caused a great deal of controversy and turmoil for individuals and families, but these questions were raised within a larger context. This presentation will be about the organized resistance at Topaz and the unexpected consequences of the loyalty registration program more generally. If you'd like to know more about anything presented here today, the two chapters I wrote about registration at Topaz and the draft in Imache are available for download for free, courtesy of Temple University Press. Information is also available on the Densho Encyclopedia site. The announcement that set off a flurry of activity in Topaz was not the first time the War Department had proposed that Japanese Americans be asked to renounce loyalty to Japan and declare their loyalty to the United States. Over the summer of 1941, the War Department sponsored a bill in Congress that would have required all dual citizens in the United States to formally renounce their non-U.S. citizenship. The War Department was focused on forcing Issei to renounce their Japanese citizenship, but the law would have to be written generally and applied equally to all American-born citizens with dual citizenship. The list of countries that grant bloodline citizenship to children of citizens born abroad is very long. At the time, it included countries that would have been both enemies and allies during World War II, and this included Italy, Germany, and Japan. The War Department sponsored two such bills in the summer of 1941 under H.R. 5879 and H.R. 6109. The bills enjoyed support from many members of Congress, but interest groups supporting immigrants and their children protested. They argued that the bill would apply to so many Americans it would create a witch hunt-like atmosphere, raising suspicions about the loyalty of large populations of American citizens without just cause. Many groups testified against the bill, including representatives from the JACL. Neither bill made it into law. However, 2 years later, with Japanese Americans in camps, the War Department found this as an opportunity to require Issei to renounce their right to claim Japanese citizenship. In Japan, any child born to Japanese national parents up through 1924 would have been granted automatic Japanese citizenship. Any child born to Japanese parents after 1924 would gain Japanese citizenship if their births were registered in Japan. In 1943, that means all Nisei ages 19 and older were automatically dual citizens in the United States and Japan, even though most Nisei did not know this and some did not want this. Even though to most this was a mere technicality, the War Department, individual states, and Congress all used this technicality to justify treating all Japanese Americans as if they were not fully U.S. citizens, even those born in the United States. The loyalty questionnaire was designed to settle this once and for all and to facilitate recruiting volunteers into a racially segregated combat team. When questions 25, 26, 27, and 28 are read together, the full intent of the form becomes more clear. Question number 25. To the best of your knowledge, was your birth ever registered with any Japanese governmental agency for the purpose of establishing a claim to Japanese citizenship? Have you ever applied for repatriation to Japan? Question number 27. Are you willing to serve in the armed forces of the United States on combat duty wherever ordered? And finally, question 28. Will you swear unqualified allegiance to the United States of America and faithfully defend the United States from any or all attack by foreign and domestic forces, and forswear any allegiance or obedience to the Japanese Emperor or any other foreign government, power, or organization? In Topaz, groups met to discuss the questionnaire and the formation of a segregated combat team. This was an opportunity to confront the government about their treatment as a whole, their lack of rights, the lack of due process, this new threat to their few remaining citizenship rights, and the injustice of asking Nisei to serve in racially segregated combat teams. This is a picture drawn by Mineo Kubo, representing one of these meetings where detainees discussed their questions and their options. These meetings were heated, emotional, and caused a wide variety of divisions within the camp. Tsune Baba, chairman of the community council, organized an open meeting with administrators to get some questions answered. Nisei and their Issei parents were anxious to find out how the program would affect them, to air their grievances, and to ask administrators tough questions. At the meeting, Project Director Ernst spoke for a few minutes to explain what residents might encounter during registration, and then he fielded questions. Many wanted to know why Stimson was not making an attempt to right all the wrongs which affected all individuals through evacuation, rather than asking citizens to make the ultimate sacrifice for the war effort, while they still lacked their basic rights. The first question cut to the core of Nikkei concerns about registration. The prospects of Nisei serving in a segregated combat team without first securing a full restoration of their citizenship rights. The crisis from the beginning was not simply a matter of loyalty. It was about Japanese Americans trying to maintain some balance between the rights and the duties of their citizenship. The meeting between administrators and residents crystallized opposition to registration and revealed the Nisei's two main concerns. First, they questioned the segregated nature of the combat team. Why segregate them like African American troops, and why register them only for combat duty? Why not allow Nisei into all branches of the military? Their second concern was for their families. What would happen to the parents of those who volunteered, especially now that registration was being extended to them as well? Would they be forced to leave the camps? Who would support them while their sons were away? Would dependence benefits be extended to the families of the Nisei even while the War Relocation Authority still detained them? One Nisei student commented that Stimson's announcement was like a delayed bombshell, exploding in the midst of unsuspecting citizens. Loyal citizens were hoping for some form of recognition from the government, enabling them to exercise their full rights of citizenship. But never did they expect to receive their answer in such a way. Some Nisei felt the government was too late in offering its faith in the Nisei, now that they were already behind barbed wire. They accused the government of blatant race discrimination with the formation of what some began calling a yellow battalion. One outspoken prominent Nisei said when Pearl Harbor was bombed, the Nisei wanted to stand up and to be counted as loyal citizens, At that time, though, they called us Japs, this person said, and put us behind barbed wire. The War Department wanted the Issei to register as loyal citizens and to volunteer for combat, but Issei said it's too late. Why didn't they publicly say we were loyal when we dearly wanted to be called loyal Americans? I still pledge my loyalty to the United States, because this is the only country I know, but I shall not bear arms. Speeches like this one had a surging influence on the rest of the group, making everyone consciously alert to the stakes involved in accepting the government's offers to volunteer for the military. It was clear early on that many Nikkei, not just a mere agitating minority, read beyond the government's propaganda of restored rights. They saw a continued pattern of race discrimination in the War Department's disingenuous efforts to allow loyal Nisei the opportunity to volunteer for a segregated combat team. Because the Issei had faced a long history of race-based discrimination, they spoke up early and loudly against the War Department's attempt to recruit volunteers. One Issei asked quite frankly, "Which way are you going to point the gun?" The Nikkei had been told that they were being evacuated for their own safety, yet when they arrived in camps, they were quick to notice that the guns pointed inward as if to prevent the escape of dangerous criminals, not outward in the posture of defense. Why would the military be any different? Where would the deceit end? One Issei queried the purpose of making enlistment voluntary. Our lives will be thrown into a battle of contradictory principles, he said, and not for the cause of any liberation. The meeting did more than raise simple questions or create a forum for airing general grievances. It opened up a sophisticated list of concerns that could not be easily answered, because the program had created its own contradictions. The night before registration was scheduled to begin, block managers met for an independent discussion of the new program. Issei block managers expressed grave concern over the loyalty question. The Issei organized a committee of 9 to present their grievances to the project director and to request that this loyalty question be changed. The committee took a statement to Project Director Ernst's office, which read, "We, the Japanese alien residents of Topaz, thereby resolve that it is absolutely impossible for us to properly answer question number 28 of the War Relocation Authority Form 126 revised. We therefore request the proper authorities of the War Relocation Authority to reconsider the said question." Ernst assured them that although he would take the matter up with the War Relocation Authority headquarters in Washington, D.C., this question was being asked of all residents in all 10 camps. He also assured them that they could answer the question in any way they saw fit, and should not feel bound to a simple yes or no response, but could qualify their answers in whatever manner best represented their sentiments. Ernst called Washington to inform officials of the petitioners' concerns. Issei leaders left his office and continued their conversations. On the morning of February 10th, registration did not begin as scheduled. Issei leaders had strengthened their stance, refusing to register, until administrators could offer them a revised loyalty question that would not deprive them of their Japanese citizenship. Issei collective disobedience forced administrators to respond with action rather than vague assurances. The Issei Committee of 9 presented Ernst with another, stronger petition. "We, the Japanese nationals, residents of Topaz, do hereby resolve absolutely not to answer question 28 in War Relocation Authority Form 126 revised. We therefore request the proper authority to delete the question number 28. Signed, Japanese national residents of Topaz." Ernst immediately responded with a teletype message to War Relocation Authority offices in Washington, D.C. The Issei leader's ultimatum was beyond Ernst's authority to answer, and he needed directions. He wrote to Washington, D.C., "Japanese aliens have raised the question concerning number 28 on War Relocation Authority Form 126. To answer an unqualified yes places them in the position of losing such protection as they now have under the Spanish consul. And because they do not have status as American citizens, They consider they will be without protection of any country with its rights, privileges, and protections. Japanese aliens feel that they have demonstrated over the past generation that they have wanted to conduct themselves in a manner loyal to the United States and would like to continue to have that reputation without a question being raised, which would deprive them of all citizenship. With the committee still in his office, Ernst placed a call to Meyer to follow up. While Ernst was waiting to be connected, he answered a call from the War Relocation Authority offices in California that were dealing with some of the same questions. The Issei at Topaz were not alone. Ernst received a call from Robert Cousins at Manzanar to discuss possible alternatives to the Issei loyalty question. They were working on the same problem at Manzanar and had drafted a substitute question. Are you sympathetic to the United States of America? And do you agree to faithfully defend the United States from any and all attacks of foreign enemies on our domestic shores? Ernst read the amended question to the members of the committee, but they were not quite satisfied with this alternative. They said they still wanted a component that would allow them to express the fact that they had been loyal to the United States for a great many years, and that they wanted to continue to do so, but they would not surrender their only recognized citizenship in the process. Ernst continued to hold for a connection with Meyer. Finally, Ernst reached Meyer on the phone. Meyer was the only man with the authority to change the question of the loyalty questionnaire, so Meyer's staff in Washington began drafting an alternative question. Issei leaders were pleased. Not only had their concerns been taken seriously, but also their resistance had forced the government to change the questionnaire. In the end, the Issei were successful. The title of the form had been Application for Leave Clearance, implying that the Issei had voluntarily requested the form. It was changed to read simply Questionnaire. An alternative question was also provided, so the Issei would not risk the possibility of losing all citizenship. On February 12, 1943, the War Relocation Authority announced that they had revised the loyalty question for Issei. Issei would be asked simply, will you swear to abide by the laws of the United States and take no action which would in any way interfere with the war effort of the United States? The satisfied Issei demands, but Nisei demands could not be met with a simple administrative revision to a form. They were asking that their citizenship rights be restored, for a desegregated military, for the right to serve in all branches of the military. Once Project Director Ernst was satisfied that Issei demands had been met, he announced that Nisei, who refused to comply with this selective service process, would be prosecuted with violating the Espionage Act. Once protest became criminalized, dissent became even more fractured, and the communities and families even more divided. But protest and forms of resistance did not end. The results of the loyalty question and the loyalty registration program were complex and demonstrated continued frustration over Japanese Americans' lack of basic citizenship rights and the racial injustices they were suffering. Only 1,208 people, fewer than 6% of eligible Nisei, enlisted in the military voluntarily from the camps as a whole. This number fell short of the quota the War Department had set for itself in creating the all-Nisei combat team. It was hoping for at least 2,000 initial volunteers, with more volunteers available to replenish the team. This presentation does not include the story about the volunteers from Hawaii who were not living under the same conditions and who did not have the same grievances about their lack of citizenship rights. They volunteered in greater numbers. 17% of all registrants in the 10 camps and approximately 20% of all Nisei answered no to the loyalty questions, number 27 and 28. Overall, 6,700 answered no to question 28, and an additional 2,000 qualified their answers. The vast majority of detainees, 65,000 total, responded an unqualified yes. But most shocking to the War Relocation Authority administrators was the sharp rise in applications for repatriation and expatriation. By 1943, the number of requests had surpassed 9,000, and most new applicants were citizen Nisei. The trend continued into 1944, when the number of requests topped out at nearly 20,000, or 16% of the total incarcerated population. The War Relocation Authority, the FBI, the War Department, and even a special Senate committee all responded to the unexpected results of registration. War Relocation Authority social scientists argued emphatically that negative responses to the loyalty questions represented protest against exclusion from the West Coast and incarceration in the War Relocation Authority camps. Negative responses did not, in their eyes, constitute any concrete proof of disloyalty. The War Relocation Authority had seen the arguments and the debates, and they understood the complexity of resistance against the loyalty registration process and against the segregated military for Issei. The War Department had initially planned to house all of those who fell into the so-called disloyal category in a small isolation facility located in southern Utah near Moab. But it soon became clear that this plan would not work after 3,000 individuals at Tule Lake refused to register. As a result, Tule Lake became the new segregation center. Congress conducted its own investigation of the results of registration and responded by passing the first law that would allow citizens to renounce their citizenship during wartime. Unlike War Relocation Authority social scientists, who argued strongly that resistance to registration should not be interpreted as a proof of disloyalty, congressional representatives had already been working on ways to strip Issei of their U.S. citizenship. They interpreted resistance to registration as proof that large numbers of Japanese Americans were loyal to Japan. On July 1, 1944, President Roosevelt signed Public Law 78-405, otherwise known as the Denaturalization Act of 1944, into law. This law allowed citizens to renounce their U.S. citizenship, normally not allowed in times of war, as this was known to be a time in which citizens might otherwise relinquish their citizenship under duress. In October 1944, instructions were sent to the camps to help facilitate the process. From February 1943 through March of 1944, Japanese Americans in Topaz spoke out against their unjust incarceration and the injustice of recruiting and then drafting Issei into racially segregated combat teams. This was not a question of loyalty alone, it was a question of citizenship. In Topaz, the Topaz Citizens Committee formed to protest the continued segregation of Issei in the military. The majority of delegates to the Citizens Committee, a full 87%, argued for sending a message to the War Department protesting segregation. 13% argued that citizen Issei should refuse to appear for their pre-induction physicals until they were drafted into non-segregated units of the military. After meeting with ACLU attorney A.L. Wirren, the group was informed that they would not be given the support of the ACLU in their efforts to resist the draft as a means of protesting racial segregation in the military. As a result, the committee dropped its efforts to resist the draft. 7 individuals from Topaz, however, eventually refused to appear for their pre-induction physicals. But this was a small number of resistors, and it did not reflect the widespread sentiment that a segregated military was unjust and that resisting the draft might be a legitimate way to protest. A committee of Issei mothers from Topaz also protested the unjust treatment of their sons in a petition they sent to President Roosevelt, Eleanor Roosevelt, Attorney General Francis Biddle, Chief Justice Harlan Fiske Stone, Secretary of War Henry Stimson, and the Director of the War Relocation Authority Dylan Meyer, who at their request forwarded the petition to Secretary of Interior Harold Ickes. They wanted everyone in charge to know the position they were taking regarding their sons. The petition read in part, "We mothers of American citizens of Japanese descent have fully cooperated for years with the American educational system so that our children would be worthy American citizens. We have taught our children to affirm their loyalty, especially in a time of national emergency. This ideal is in keeping with the traditional spirit of Japanese mothers, As you may know, before evacuation, we did not in one instance oppose the drafting of our sons, but willingly sent them with our encouragement. The government has already impressed upon the public the fact that many have volunteered before evacuation, have gone overseas and established brilliant records. A number of our boys has volunteered from the War Relocation Authority Center. The motivating impulse behind our sons' willingness to serve with loyalty, courage, and self-sacrifice is not only loyalty to their country, but also the hope that they will be accorded greater consideration and the restoration of their civil rights. With the reinstitution of selective service for Japanese Americans on the same basis as other citizens, we mothers deplore the discriminatory measures directed against them. We desire for our sons the privilege of entering the branch of the armed services they select and receiving the full benefits accorded to American citizens. We humbly request that the civil rights be restored to our children now. Then we can courageously send forth our sons to fulfill their responsibility to their country without any fear whatsoever of their own and for their families' future security. Responses to the mothers of Topaz were sent to Mrs. Wakako Adachi, representing the Topaz mothers. Brigadier General Robert H. Dunlop reminded the mothers that they had no right to dictate military decisions. Dylan Meyer responded to the mothers of Topaz with sympathy, but also with a warning that they avoid any appearance of what he called espionage. He wrote, "I am certain that you want to take no step which would interfere with the progress toward complete restoration of civil rights and the recognition of your children as loyal American citizens." 7 Issei resisted the draft from Topaz, but many more shared the sentiment that the continued segregation of Issei in the military and the continued lack of Nisei citizenship rights warranted protest. One of the most damaging effects of the registration crisis and the draft the next year was the artificial division of Japanese Americans into loyal and disloyal categories. Debates continue to rage today about how to shake the stigma and the misunderstandings that resulted from the loyalty to registration. Even though a relatively small number of Nisei resisted the draft directly in 1944, 325 total, the majority of Japanese Americans objected to many forms of race-based injustice they were suffering. Heart Mountain draft resistor Takashi Hoshizaki made his own position very clear. He said he would be happy to serve in the military when he was free to do so as a full citizen, not from inside a concentration camp, and not in a racially segregated combat team. He resisted the draft in 1944, but served honorably in Korea. For him, like so many others, it was not a question of loyalty. It was a question of keeping his citizenship rights and his citizenship responsibilities intact. It was about demanding justice and resisting racial discrimination. In 1947, President Truman pardoned all Nisei draft resistors based on a committee's recommendation. The committee concluded Japanese Americans had justifiable reasons for resisting the draft under the circumstances. And in 1948, President Truman desegregated the military. Thank you for listening. It's been an honor to be a part of this virtual pilgrimage. If you would like to learn more about the stories of resistance at Topaz and Amache, download 2 chapters for free, courtesy of Temple University Press, or visit Densho Encyclopedia. You can always email me if you have more questions. I can be found at Southern Oregon University.